It's really
Hi,
great to
Emma.
see you. Could you please give us an update? It's been quite a while since we last had a chat, and I know you've been incredibly busy with the schools and wellbeing bill. Could you give us a bit of an update on that?
Yep, quite happy to do that. On the practical side, it has been going on a long time. Bridget Phillipson introduced it into the Commons in December 2024, just after the verdicts in the Sarah Sharif trial. Um, she had it planned long before that, but that became a real good lever to bring it in. And it's been mentioned all the way through the debates as that trial. But let's get it on the record here and now, right? It was not the fact that child was home educated that meant she was hidden. She wasn't hidden to the services. And the child safeguarding practice review, as they're now called, said quite clearly that it was system failures. They had to say, well, of course, if there'd been better systems for home education, it might not have happened. But even the social services failed that child, who there was a court hearing about when she was roughly 6 months old in the womb, 6 months before she was, sorry, not 6 months before she was born. The family were in court and she was part of the consideration. So she's been known to social services all the way along,
Right.
but politicians fall for a good narrative.
Yeah.
And of course, the narrative has been since 2009 that if the state doesn't supervise home education, parents will abuse them. And that is the narrative we're working against, which is not true. There's another one that's come along recently. We might get onto that later. I don't want to get it too confused. Right. So, where's it up to? After many delays, particularly it rushed through the House of Commons. It was out of the House of Commons into the Lords in March last year, and it was then had several delays. We're not sure why.
Okay.
One reason may be that suddenly the Welsh government wanted to be involved and they had to do some work for that. There may have been other reasons, but it took a lot longer. We also know that the Conservatives have been very unhappy with many bills um, put forward by the Labour government, and their only weapon has been to slow them down in
Yeah.
law.
Yeah.
And so, what is relevant is we're now coming towards the end of a parliamentary session, and there seems to be a high number of bills that need to be got through very quickly. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. So, we are, it has now been through all its stages in the House of Lords. That with regards to elective home education, which is covered in the children not in school clauses, and also the next section, which is independent educational institutions. I won't go into them in details every time. Most of our concerns about the CNIS, children not in school section, but we've got concerns about both. Most of the bad things in there are still in. There's been a bit of mellowing of some of the demands, but some of that mellowing hasn't been spelt out. It says it will be defined in regulations um, in the
Yes.
future. So
Okay.
exactly what we don't know. I'll give you one example. The original documentation said the parent needed to record the contact details of anybody who had any input into a child's education. Now, to the DfE, the Department for Education, alias the DfE, which I'll keep saying, um, involvement in home education, they don't know what they mean. This is the problem. They could mean somebody who sits at a table with a child with some books out, but they didn't specify that. But to home educators, if you go into a shop and you're talking to the shopkeeper and the shopkeeper explains something to your children, that's home education. You take them to a museum, you go swimming, they have swimming lessons, that's education. And it was really unclear. What if grandma comes round and reads them a story? Is that education? Yes, to the home educator, because life is is education. It doesn't start when you get to 5 and it doesn't stop when you get out of university. It keeps going on.
Yeah.
And so they've now said they'll put a time limit on it, but we're not sure what it is. Um, I don't think it'll be as much as 6 hours a week, because in an earlier stage in the Commons, the minister who was then the minister, Stephen Morgan, he's not any longer a minister, ruled that 6 hours a week out. They said that is too high, we need less. But we don't know what it means. It could mean an hour a week, it could mean 2 hours a week, and you won't have to do it. So if a child, well, you know, if they go to scouts or brownies,
Mhm.
right? Most home education parents would not see that as recreation, they'd see it as part of learning,
Yes.
skills, and so on. And some of those last more than an hour.
Yeah.
So we don't know where that threshold's going to be.
We also don't know what records they want you to take of the person either, presumably, how much detail they want.
Well, part of the trouble with that is since May last year, they've kept saying they are talking to the office of the data protection guy, information commissioner,
Yeah.
the the information commissioner's office about what data they can gather lawfully and things and how they can do it. And yeah, there's nothing in the bill that says clearly you're only allowed to give us this data about the people doing the teaching. Part of this, and Lord Wayne, his speech in the second reading, which was on the 1st of May in the House of Lords, spelt out that since about 2021, home education has been looked after in the Department for Education by the division that has the title along the lines of counter extremism and out of school education. In other words, prevent. That is, we know a one-time prevent officer leads the team on elective home education.
Right.
So it's become a prevent
Yes.
initiative, and
Yeah.
that is why there's so much data wanted.
Yes.
They're trying to track down extremists, but
Right.
right, extremism is a funny word though, because actually sports people who spend hours training could be said
Yes.
to be extremists,
Mm.
right? Somebody who studies something. What about the extremists who used to go? I don't know if they still do. We all used to call them anoraks in my youth, who went train spotting and things like that. They
Mm.
were extreme into it.
Mm. Yeah.
What really we need to say is there are violent extremists,
Yes.
there are non-violent extremists.
Yeah.
And as long as people are not encouraging violence and hatred, then extremism shouldn't be a problem. Because
That's a really good point.
a
Yeah.
lot of the people who do important things in life are people who are very focused
Yes.
and get into something, maths or medical things, and they become very dedicated to those causes, you know. So, but we have this thing that there is in the DfE a view, and this did come out recently. I said we'd come back to it later. I know it's not on the bill, but it is in a way. On the 5th of February, do you remember that Keir Starmer made a speech in Hastings? Most people remember it because of the first part of it. He accused Mandelson multiple times of lying to him. It was the
Oh,
first statement he made on Peter Mandelson, and he went on about Mandelson, as if they'd never been best friends, as
yeah.
if he was the playground bully. Anyway, as he got onto his speech, he was talking about this word extremism. And in the middle of it, and if you, I can provide you the links to it and things, the videos and so on, so people can check this out. He gave 3 lines. Downing Street put out his speech in teleprompt spacing, believe it or not. They didn't make it into English, they put it out in teleprompt. And on 3 lines, he basically said, he was talking about extremism. We are going to crack down on homeschooling, to those people who opt out of their responsibility to send their children to school. We've got to stop this extremism here. Now, besides the Sarah Sharif and the abuse slur mud that's been thrown at home educators, started with the then chair of Ofsted in 2015. They started throwing mud at home educators, saying that we were 50%. One headline was 50% of extremists home educate, but nobody produced the evidence of that. I know somebody who that was a statement made by a counter police lead at the Met Police, and he sent him a Freedom of Information request, and of course they came back, oh, we can't share that, it's to do with national security. So we don't know what they exactly mean by what their group of extremists are, or anything, but that narrative is now there. In
Yeah,
other words, schools are a part of social engineering.
yeah,
And where we're at now in this country is, if you do not like the values which are being pressed forward and it's not just the British state, it's a bigger situation. If you don't like those values, then we're going to force your children into school to teach them that. And certainly that was spelt out more clearly in the documentation behind the failed 2022 schools bill, which was put forward by Boris Johnson's government. They mellowed the language, but they didn't change the intent in the documentation behind this bill, that they want to teach every child the state's values,
yeah,
not just on respect and so on, but actually moral values. And for me, there is a really clear line. If the state wants to educate, it should educate children and young people in regard to skills,
yeah,
but not values.
yeah,
And we don't make enough of that in my mind. We have to start saying it is not up to the state to take my children off me and in and indoctrinate them with its values. And that is what this fight is about. It's about fights for everybody. And that is that's important. And I'll come back to that in a minute or a few. Um, so this bill, that's where it's at. Perhaps though, I should just tell everybody where it's practically at.
yeah,
That's where it's leading to.
yeah,
Um, okay, it's completed its course in the Lords. It's now going through a process that is properly called consideration of amendments and messages, but commonly called ping pong. And that's because the bill has one short debate in one house and then goes to the other one and then back until they both agree. And basically, today is the 27th of March when we're recording this. That's going to be useful marker for people, right?
Yeah.
Because it's already had the first two stages of ping pongs. During ping pong, they don't discuss the whole bill. The second house, which in this case was the Lords, made amendments that the first house, the Commons, hadn't seen. So the bill went back to the Commons for the Commons to consider those amendments. The government take charge of that process, and basically what they said is we want to scrap. We disagree with every amendment made by the Lords. We're going to scrap them. We want to scrap them all. But here are two replacement ones, and they were on the topic of the children's and young people using social media and smartphones, which I'm sure everybody will know are a bit of a hot topic at the moment. When it went back to the Lords, which was on Wednesday this week, Wednesday the 25th, the Lords forced votes on 5 places where they didn't want the amendments to be lost.
Okay.
Right? And encouragingly, in a way, there was one that concerned home educators. Baroness Barron, who used to be the Conservative minister, has become really aggressive. She's been fighting hard for the tightest regulations on home educators, and she wanted to make every child who's ever been in care, who's ever had an inquiry if they were in danger of significant harm, or who've ever been a child in need, which is a very low threshold, require the parents to have a pre-deregistration meeting with the local authority to gain approval before they could take a child down to school.
Okay.
And she's pressed this time and time again. And she wanted to bring it back in. Now, they had these votes, and there were 4 of the clauses, amendments they wanted to retain. The opposition won the vote. They lost one, which was that one on children not in school registers. So, in regards to our conversation, that matter is now closed. What it says in the bill is what it will say at the end. There will be no further changes to the CNIS or the independent educational institutions clauses. That is over and finished. But the good thing is that it has now got to go through at least 2 more small discussions in each house. The next one, I need to say, as I've said, we're on the 27th of March. Both houses are now starting the Easter recess. They do not sit again till Monday, the 13th of April.
Okay.
Yesterday, the leader of the House of Commons announced that the next stage of ping pong in the Commons would take place on Wednesday, the 15th of April. So that is when will be happening. We were expecting it that week because on Wednesday, the whips in the House of Lords announced the next stage in the Lords would be on Monday, the 20th of April. So we now know the 2 dates.
Yeah.
And there will now be a arguing between the 2 houses, which could go on a while. In the end, because it's the elected house, the Lords will always give way to the Commons. But they try and get as much out of it. And right now, I think there's another thing we ought to bring about or mention. because it's relevant to the bill. Normally, a parliamentary session runs for 12 months, and everything has got to be more or less tied up in that 12 months period. Any legislation must be passed. Now, most people might be aware that private members' bills do not get carried over to the next session. A session isn't between elections. It's a roughly 12-month cycle between state openings of parliaments, these days King's speeches, right? There has been long ones in the past. Theresa May, after Brexit, announced the session would last for 2 years to give her more time. And they have got longer than 12 months. And now this one is, Starmer won the election in July, so we're nearly on 2 years for this one. And it's been rumoured that the state opening of next session would take place, excuse me, would take place in May since last September. The BBC ran the story, but there's been no confirmation. Yesterday, in the House of Commons, in his statement, the leader of the House announced that the state opening would take place on Wednesday, the 13th of May, which is a week after the local elections that we've all got in our heads at the moment. So it's the week after. Before that, the House is to be prorogued, which is a fancy word for shut down, right?
Okay.
And at prorogation, however you pronounce it, any private members' bills that haven't been passed will be scrapped.
Okay.
And in lots of people's minds at the moment is the assisted dying, or some people calling it the assisted suicide bill, which was a very bad bill, rushed in without proper work as a private member's bill. And they're complaining, some lords are complaining that it will fail because other lords are filibustering. Other lords saying we're just trying to make it better. And it's really bad. But that isn't going to complete its stages. So we now know that bill is not going to go through. If the government wanted to not to carry it over, they should have made it a government bill, but that would be more contentious. So any private bills that haven't been private members' bills that will be haven't been passed now will fail. It is possible if a bill is still going through Parliament for it to be carried over to the next session. No technical details here. It could do that. But I have looked and I do not know of any bills that have been in ping pong being carried over. So the children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill has until Parliament is prorogued to be passed. So it could be frantic because there's several other bills that are in the stage that have been delayed for various reasons.
Right.
Now, the leader of the House said he would confirm the date of the closure of Parliament in future. So we don't have a fixed date for it, but the day before he made that statement, a newspaper, I don't know, not a political magazine, Politico, had a thing saying that the most likely day was Wednesday, the 29th of April. So a month, just over a month away, but with 2 weeks of recess. So they're going to have about 2.5 weeks to clear all the bills they want to get through. So this is going to be hectic. So that's really where the bill's up to. It's got draconian powers. We've had brought into it this revealed really through the social cohesion action plan that it's always been about counter-extremism, which is why all the data collection, why they're wanting to, it also informs they're using the safeguarding to say, oh, we must talk to children, but it's more than that. It's a bigger thing. So that is the update. I think it will go through, and perhaps where we need to think next is about what parents can do.
Yes.
If you are not already talking about it within your family and within your home educating circles, start talking about it.
Mm.
There are some people who say, oh, there's nothing here, it won't be that bad. It will be for some.
Yes. And
Because,
the
go on.
key is when you are caught off guard, that's when you let things happen that with when you've got all your wits about you, you're far more in control of what you're willing to reveal and what you're not. But when you're caught on the back foot, that's when you let people in when you maybe wouldn't, or you reveal things that you maybe shouldn't, or um, ask your children to come in and let somebody talk to them when perhaps they don't need to, they don't
Yeah,
want to, they don't have to. It's only afterwards, isn't it, when you calm down maybe and you think it through and think actually I shouldn't have allowed that to happen, but I felt under pressure.
yeah, yeah. And even now, local authority home education officers will often turn up unannounced,
Mm,
and and things. But then on other occasions, let's put this on the record of this video. I mentioned Sarah Sharif earlier. She was known to a local authority home education team, but when they said they were going to visit, they went to the wrong address. Yeah, she wasn't visited because they failed to get the right address to go to. They went to a previous address.
yeah, it's the level. It's the levels of incompetence. And these are the people that are the experts that are deeming whether or not you're doing a good enough job. It
Yeah,
it's worrying, isn't it?
it is. It is extremely worrying. Is this that this is where it's going? That we are trusting local authorities who have a track record, and I don't think they can have anything else. I'm not criticizing them because human nature, there's none of us who are perfect.
Mm, mm,
We all get things wrong. You apologize. I got that one wrong,
yeah,
right? But local authorities can't do that because if they apologize, they will get sued,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
if you take responsibility, you are then to blame. And collectively, local authorities can't do it. I'm sure that anybody who's had anything to do with the special educational needs system will know how bad local authorities behave and blame shift all the time.
yeah, yeah.
They will not take the responsibility.
No,
And that is why blaming home educators for some things is very popular
yeah,
because we're the outliers. But so parents will have to choose. I do know people who are saying we will not comply. You have to weigh the cost and you have to say, yeah, and I won't criticize anybody for complying, but I will say to them very plainly, you and your children will regret it in the future because the ratchet only ever tightens when the state wants to get bigger and bigger. It
mm,
never slackens off.
mm,
And even if it's not for you, if you're a home educator, and I would say any parent ought to be concerned about this, but basically, if you are, um, if you comply now, think of what it'd be like for your children when they want to say, my children I don't want them to go to school. It will be even harder to make that decision.
Mm. Yeah.
It will become, sadly, after the disaster of the Second World War and the compulsory schooling in Germany, Germany didn't change its laws, it retained them. And now Germany, home education is not allowed. And there may be some who are doing it around, underground, but there are many stories of children being forcibly dragged into school by the local authority, by the state. And that is why we want, because there is this, and we'll get onto it later, international agenda that every child needs to be in school because that's where the state can shape the citizens it wants. And internationally, there's a working together to get a monoculture of people around the world who think the same.
Yes.
And, you know, home education is a route for free thinkers, for those who want to think outside, think for themselves rather
Mm.
than be told what to think. So, yes, you will have to weigh out, people will have to weigh up what their local authority is like. There
Yeah.
may be some good ones. I don't want to rule that out,
Yeah.
but there'll be many more bad ones.
Yeah.
And it's the bad ones we need to do. I know people are talking about legal action to try and overturn some of the bill. That's got complexities. I am investing in that. I hope there is one, but I've also got to say to people, do not assume that it will be successful
Yes.
because the courts these days
Yeah.
end up making some bad decisions. I mean, again, on social media, we've all heard in the last 2 or 3 days about the case in America of the girl who's just won a 20-year-old who's just won a case because she was using social media and YouTube, which isn't social media, that it has a social aspect to it, um, since she was 6. But what's not been said, but some people reporting, is the fact that her parents just abandoned her in front of the screen, that she was abused. It was a dysfunctional family.
Mm.
And therefore, parental responsibility is being transferred not just to the state, but to the social media companies.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And parents will have to decide which way they're going to go with this.
Yeah.
It will be a big one, but I say I want to encourage them to take the long view.
Yes.
And can I bring in something encouraging at this point?
Please do.
Good. Not many people remember this, but back in 2020, President Macron of France, again going back to what we were saying earlier about extremism,
Hmm.
made a long speech in October of that year to say that he was going to tackle extremism in France. This followed on from a school teacher being stabbed after he'd shown a cartoon of Mohammed to a class.
Yes.
And amongst there, he said, we're going to make school attendance compulsory from the age of 3, which was outlawing home education.
Yes.
Um, Now, you already had to be approved by the authorities, and they carried out inspections. And earlier this year, there's a video on my own website where I've talked to a mum who now lives here, who wasn't a native of France, but her husband was, and they lived there for some years, began to home educate, and the situation got so bad with their local authority rep, um, they decided to come to England.
Right.
If people want to know what it can be like when you get bad attitudes within the education system, I'd recommend that video, and I'll send you the link
Yes,
to the
do, yeah.
page, as long as you remind me. So, but that so it's got bad, and now you've got to get approval, and it really is in exceptional circumstances. There is something at the moment where people who've already been home educating have been allowed, and the children are older, have been allowed to continue provided they satisfy the thing. And it appears that on the 18th of February, just gone, there was an important judgment in a French court. Because one of the families decided they'd been treated unfairly by their local authority and decided not to comply with sending their children to school. And on the 18th of February, they won their case.
Brilliant.
And I can't read French, so I've got an English translation of it from the website. I didn't use Google Translate. I used something perhaps a bit more reliable. But one of the points the lawyer makes in that is that what the court's ruling now said that civil disobedience, in this case, was legitimate.
Wow.
The state was not treating them fairly, and so they took civil disobedience action. Now, there's two, that's the easy bit to understand is disobedience. The state is telling me to do this. I am not doing it. I don't believe they're being just here. But the other bit is civil. The civil is important because that means peaceful. It means within everything else, you are willing to carry out the consequences, to accept the consequences if you are found wrong, right? But it isn't wrecking places. We live in an age when there's a lot of uncivil disobedience around. People think they can have a right in the streets. I would never say that to people. This is what I would say is we need to consider civil disobedience. You need to say, which price am I willing to pay? Letting the state parent my children or bearing the consequences of refusing to let the state.
Yeah.
And I will say here, this is one family. But if if enough people take that stand, the more people who take that stand, the harder it will be for the authorities
Yes.
to
What I'm
insist on
saying.
it.
Yeah.
One or two people might end up in court, one or two people might end up in jail. But if they're always replaced by somebody else and more people every time, then the state will have to reconsider its policies. And I don't know if that will happen. I mean, one home educating group put out a headline recently that shocked people. It was that we're in a real mess. I won't use their language. There was lots of stars in the middle of words, right? But barring a miracle, no, what was it? War, an election, or a miracle, we've had it. And it may be, look, I don't want to rule this out. We live in a very volatile moment of history.
Yes.
We have done since the start of the lockdowns.
Yeah.
I don't see that volatility ending anytime soon.
Yeah.
We've got 2 weeks of recess. What will the political landscape be between now and recess? Even if the bill gets passed, if there's more an escalation in war and we don't have the defense for it and we have to start realigning money, will the local authorities be able to afford to implement things? We really don't know. So there may be war might even be a miracle, if you understand what I mean.
Yes,
It
yeah, I
might
do.
deliver the people from the tyranny that we seem to be heading towards in Western countries.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. But if none of that happens, are we willing, are people going to be willing, are they going to roll over and play dead in front of this bill? Or are they going to stand up like this family did and in bigger numbers and say that it is legitimate, civil disobedience is legitimate when the state is overstepping the mark?
That's a fantastic phrase to remember for everything, isn't it? That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
really
And
important takeaway.
I think that is where parents need to go.
Mm.
I think we have to remember, I've said this is in France, we have to remember this isn't just happening in Britain. Macron, I did get people to remember when Starmer said in February about extremism and homeschooling, I said, remember Macron. And really, he's good friends with Macron. He talks to him. He's a buddy. Where do you think he got the idea from?
Mm.
Right? These people have international conversations with each other. Now, one of the freest countries in Europe at the moment on home education, perhaps, apart from England and Britain generally, has been Finland.
Okay.
Right? Now, in Finland, it's been such a thing is you do have annual meetings with a teacher from a school just to check the kids are learning. We've got friends there. I know what happens, right? Um, but generally, you don't have to register. You just get on with it, and you can withdraw your kids from school fairly easy. So much so that from well over a decade ago, when Sweden outlawed home education, there's an island in the sea between Sweden and Finland because Sweden invaded Finland in the past. And so the west of Finland is Finnish speaking, and this island is the most westerly is Swedish speaking, and this most island is the most westerly piece of Finland, and it speaks Swedish. A lot of home educators settled on the island
Right.
because they were
Yeah.
talking and they've made a really good relationship with the locals and they've worked together with them and it's been quite a positive thing. But now the message of extremism is hitting Finland because on the 11th of March, so it's not only a few days ago, a article appeared in an English newspaper, which was covered in the Finnish ones, that the Finnish security chief floated the idea of a home school ban,
Okay.
right? And in fact, when you look back in the records, um, the same article outlet had an article back in December where this was being floated as well on security grounds. And they're rumouring that this island has now become a haven of extremists, right?
Okay.
Um, Thankfully, the day after, on the 12th of March, the Finnish education minister rejected a ban, but said perhaps we ought to improve the regulation and monitoring of home education.
Yeah.
So this is spreading. Portugal has gone much harder during lockdowns. They became a harder place. And throughout Europe, there is different regimes, but there's a general thing.
Mm.
And it is, in a way, what we're talking about is where is all this thinking coming from? Is it happening? Well, no, it's not. We are going to jump abroad very briefly. Anyway, I will tell you more about it. And again, my wife's written about this and it's on my website and an article called The Erosion of Parenthood. I must get the proper thing. Look, folks, I'm just looking for the right thing, the right phrase, right? In September last year, UNESCO, which is the United Nations Educational and all the other letters, it is the United Nations Education Wing, published a report called Homeschooling through the Human Rights Lens.
Oh, that
Homeschooling
sounds.
through a human rights lens.
Oh
And
dear.
you've got the video,
No, I just the title of it.
right? Yeah. Well, 25th of September it was published. And this report basically says that while parents should be free to home educate, to protect children's educational rights, the states must supervise everything they do. Right? And this is what is being talked about. And I would really recommend it's things that have been there in the background, but I'm really grateful to UNESCO because they've put it all together in one report
Right.
and they've laid it out. And in this country, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've heard more and more about support for home educators. Nobody ever talked about that before. But when you look at this agenda, it says we can do this supervision by offering them support. So this is where the language is coming from. It's not just England, of course. Wales has got involved in the Children's Wellbeing Bill on these matters, and they've been pushing this agenda. Why? Because they signed up to the UNCR, the, the, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, as we have done. There is only one country, major country in the world, that has not signed up significant most of its powers to be under the UNCRC, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and that is the USA. And that happened because when Hillary Clinton announced she was heading in that direction, the homeschool, and it is homeschool there, not home education, the homeschool lobby smelt a rat.
Right.
And they rose up, they started lobbying their politicians, and the USA has never ratified this convention. And it is this convention that UNESCO is saying states should supervise the education of every child.
That's really interesting. Obviously, the home education, the homeschooling in the US is massive, isn't it? And they were able to stand up with and fight back.
Yeah.
That
And
is,
it's growing,
yes, yeah,
right? It
yeah,
began, admittedly, with right-wing evangelicals wanting to teach their children at home. A lot of it culturally, because a lot of America was home dwelling people anyway. Schools were a distance off,
mm,
but it's much wider than that now.
yeah,
Um, One of the drivers I got told about a few years ago now was gun crime in schools,
yes,
and parents didn't want to send. And more, like here, it isn't just, it's the values that are being taught in schools that are there. And
yeah,
home education is the only safety brake on states using schools for total indoctrination.
Absolutely.
If you cannot get out of school, take your children out of school, the state can teach them what it
Mm.
wants.
I don't know if you're familiar with a lady called Candice Owens, Randall.
Yeah, I've heard of her.
Yeah, so
Don't follow her.
she's one of the, I think she possibly has the largest YouTube channel podcast in the
Yeah,
world, possibly. Certainly in America, but she's a big advocate for homeschooling and home education. So that will certainly um, help the cause there as well and grow the
yeah,
numbers.
yeah. So yeah, that's
Very positive.
that's positive, and it's there. And this is the whole thing. There was a recent court case that actually backs up my point. Your viewers may have heard that Labour, one of the first things it did with education was to put VAT on private school fees. And they may know that several groups have tried taking the government to court and have lost the case. What they may not know is in the most recent, and I actually am struggling to find it, but in the appeal, the court backed up something that I think was said in the previous thing, is that when it came to religious parents who didn't want their children learning the values in schools, um, they were not denying, the state was not denying them to be able to provide their children with that type of education because religious schools are often fee-paying schools, right? They're not all are, but some are, because the law is in place that says they can home educate. And therefore, home education is what made it legal for the state to impose VAT on private schools, or one of the main causes.
Oh, okay.
Now, that should work both ways. I'm not sure the courts will want it to work both ways, but it should say you therefore cannot, because this is a legal requirement, you cannot force children into school.
Yes. Yes, understand the argument. Yes.
Yeah. And that is, that is important. But it does back up this thing that every parent in the country, whether they home educate or not, and I know, look, one of the peers I've got a lot of time for, I don't agree with her on everything, but she does call a spade, is Baroness Claire Fox. Very much into free speech. And whenever she defends home educators, she says something along the line is, I can't see why anybody would want to home educate, but I will argue that they should have the freedom to do so. And basically, whether or not you think we're crazy, I would say to anybody watching this, if you want your children or your grandchildren to have a free education, a free from state indoctrination education, you have got to be on the side of home educators because they are the only safety brake on the state education system.
That's right.
And look at all the experiments that have been carried out in schools in values in recent years. Right? It goes back a long way, but some of the more recent ones have been crazy. And we know, the transgender thing and the silliness that if you think you've got a different biology, you can have a different biology.
Yeah.
But when people have tried selling this and it's backfired on them, do they ever apologize? Do they say, oh, we've had 10 years of this policy? Well, somebody did accuse it yesterday because now, yesterday, 26th of March, the Olympic movement
Yes.
suddenly said, right
Yes.
from now on, only biological females can be in the ladies category,
Yeah.
right? That has been that overturned something that was accepted 10 years ago. For 10 years, they've been pushing something that is stupidity,
Mm.
right? And people have been getting criticized for saying this is stupid.
Mm.
And it's the same in schools. Schools are pushing things, and more, they are hiding things from parents. They are becoming in the parental role. And certainly, this is one thing worth repeating. I've said it before, so if people have heard me before, they might find it familiar. And it isn't an original to me, but it really works. You see, I'm old enough. When I went to school, every so often my mum and dad would take me out to school for a day. And they would write a letter or a note to the teacher to say, Randall won't be in school on such a day. We are taking him out for the day. And I would be marked in the register as authorized absence because my absence had been authorized by my parents.
That's right.
Because back in the 50s and 60s, school teachers knew they operated in loco parentis, in the place of parents. And education has always been a parental duty. And if we ask somebody to help in that, they are functioning as a partner with the parent.
Mm.
Now, a few years ago, things changed in this country. Now it is no longer the parent that authorizes absence. It is the state. So we've moved from loco parentis to
Mm.
loco civitatis. That the school teacher is now an agent of the state, not of the parents.
That's interesting. Mm.
Yeah. And it's something that everybody should be able to understand.
Mm.
And what Starmer said on the 5th of February in Hastings was the state wants you to send your children to school so we can teach it our values. You don't have the authority or responsibility to stop your children doing that. And that affects everybody. And that is what I'd like not just home educators to wake up to. And I know you've probably got a wider audience, but I'd like that wider audience to grasp.
Mm.
If home education goes the way that UNESCO wants it to do in this country, and it's going that way, then through tarring us with black brushes, one is abuse, one's extremism. They can't come up and say it directly, but if we go that way, then future generations will go the way that it went in Germany under Hitler, that state indoctrination, whether that's from the left or the right,
Mm.
won't matter. Because the bigger states get, the more authoritarian. It is not left or right that matters, it's the vertical axis between actually it's anarchy, it's absolutely no rule, and authoritarianism. You've got to have a balanced position in the middle. There's got to be some authority, but it mustn't be too big. And when once states start going to the right or the left, they also go towards the
Yeah.
authoritarian, the
Yes.
totalitarian. So I'm not saying left or right here.
No.
Either side can easily become more authoritarian because they want to govern.
That's right.
So, that is where what we're fighting against. And that fits into this bigger picture, you know. Another thing, it's not home education, this one. About 18 months, 2 years ago, if my memory's right, Tony Blair's institute published a report on data protection and the use of data. And the person who worked on it with Tony Blair was William Hague. So we had somebody from the left and somebody from the right. And it really hit me because I heard them on Radio 4 Today program that morning talking about this report. And they said this, and they were talking about data, the use of data and data protection. And Blair said it, what we need is cross-party agreement. So when there is a change of government, there is no change of policy.
Mm.
Think about it. That is frightening. We have a term in this country some people use, the uni-party.
Thank you, Randall. That's been absolutely fascinating and worrying, but also a lot of food for thought and things that we all need to face up to and think about, like you say, what we're willing to tolerate and what we're not willing to tolerate, and what we might do to push back. So thank you so much for the update and all of your time. How can people follow you and find out what else is going on, the next stages?
The simplest way is to have a look at my blog that started back in 2009. It did go through a quiet spell. I've resurrected it recently. It's called No Nationalisation of Our Kids. I'll send you the link to it. It's got the UNESCO article on there with links to that, and it's also got the interview I did with the French, the mum from
Brilliant.
France on it, and various other things I've done. That's the best way to do that. And yeah, there's an email address on there that you can use as well if you want to contact me. But boy, don't expect a quick reply. I'll say that. There's a lot going on
There
still.
is a lot going on. Really grateful to you for all the work that you're doing, Randall.
And thank you for having me on to talk about these things. And let's hope that something turns around at some point.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Bye.